It's all your fault. This happened because you haven't been supporting my son as his wife, my mother-in-law said, deeply upset as she saw her son lying motionless on the hospital bed. Her words shocked me, and I felt a strong sense of guilt. My husband, Ethan, had recently started working as a freelancer, but his business wasn't doing well. Then he had a traffic accident and fell into a coma. As time went on without him waking up, a doctor called me into a separate room. He looked worried, as if he had something serious to say. I feared the worst about Ethan's condition. The doctor handed me a phone number and whispered, "Please call this number immediately." Then he told me something even more shocking in a desperate voice. Trembled uncontrollably and rushed out of the room. "My name is Emily. I'm 42 years old, and I work as a freelance interior designer. I've been married to Ethan, who is the same age as me, for 2 years. He works for a housing manufacturer, and we met through a project we worked on together. When we first met, he seemed serious and a bit shy, but he actively engaged in conversation, which helped us grow close. We used to go out for meals with colleagues, and one day he asked me, 'Will you date me?' From that day, our relationship changed. We got married after a long period of dating. People often thought we had been married for a long time due to our age, so they were surprised to learn we were only in our second year of marriage. With marriage, the topic of children came up. We occasionally get asked if we have children, but neither Ethan nor I have the time due to our busy jobs. As a freelancer, I don't have set days off, and while Ethan generally has weekends off, we haven't been able to go out together recently. Just seeing each other at dinner and talking about our day makes me happy. We're both content without having children." However, my mother-in-law seemed displeased. My in-laws run a privately owned clinic that has been passed down through generations. Ethan didn't become a doctor, and perhaps she wants us to have children to be successors. Although she never said it directly, I sensed it. Regardless of whether we have children or not, my mother-in-law disliked me from the start. She spoils Ethan a lot, and while it's normal to show affection, it seemed to go beyond the usual parent-child relationship. She treated me like a thief who deceived her precious son. My mother-in-law directs such hostility toward me. She glared at me even during the marriage proposal and wouldn't respond properly when I tried to talk to her. Every time we meet, the atmosphere becomes tense, so despite living nearby, we stopped visiting them. My parents significantly influenced my decision to become an interior designer. They were originally in the construction industry, and I admired them, which led me to pursue something related to home building. After graduating from university, I worked for an interior design company, but I became a freelancer around the age of 30 and have been one ever since. The project that brought Ethan and me together was one I worked on shortly after becoming a freelancer. We got married at the age of 40, and at the same time, he quit his job at the housing manufacturer where he had been working. He then started his own business as an interior coordinator. However, Ethan's business wasn't going well. Not receiving any work offers, Ethan started to spend a lot of time at home, not really doing anything. Even when I suggested he might need to do something to get work, he didn't listen. Our income drastically decreased from his days as an employee, and it felt like I was the one supporting us. "Look, there must be something you can do to promote yourself. How about studying and trying different things?" I suggested. "Shut up. What do you even know? You're probably secretly mocking me, aren't you?" Ethan began to hurl abusive words at me. His eyes showed clear hostility, and I could sense jealousy and inferiority. I didn't achieve success as a freelancer without considerable effort, but no matter how much I explained it to him, he wouldn't understand. He constantly said patriarchal things like, "You're not being considerate. Can't you support your husband's image?" Whenever I tried to retort, he would immediately cut me off with, "What are you trying to talk back? You're really annoying and boring." Apparently, he had been complaining to his parents too, and they would often call me, saying, "It's despicable to hurt Ethan like this," even though it was me who was getting hurt. I just stayed silent and waited for the storm to pass, knowing he'd return to his room once he was satisfied. Then Ethan got into a car accident and ended up in a vegetative state. His mother became extremely agitated, blaming me, saying, "It's your fault. This all happened because you haven't supported him as his wife." Even though I knew her accusation was unfounded, her words pierced deep into my heart. I recognized the familiar look in her eyes, the same as Ethan's when he would glare at me. Despite visiting him every day, his condition remained unchanged. "Doctor, will my son always remain like this? When will he wake up?" she would ask, pressing the doctor for answers only to be disappointed with their response. Out of frustration, she eventually decided to take him back to their home. "We'll take care of Ethan ourselves. You only have to put in the money and handle the household chores too." Since Ethan's accident, his mother has constantly blamed me, saying it's all my fault. Gradually, her accusations and the tension between us have only grown worse. I started blaming myself more for not being there for him, so just as his family wanted, I decided to devote myself to Ethan and his family. For the next year, I lived a life shuttling between our home and his family's home, focusing on work and household chores. During that time, Ethan never once opened his eyes. Maybe it's because of me that he won't wake up. Feeling deeply discouraged, I would often mutter that while staring at his face during visits to his family's home. Then one day, Ethan's father collapsed and had to be hospitalized. Fortunately, he was expected to be discharged after a few days. "Oh, thank goodness," his mother said, visibly relieved. However, without his father, the clinic couldn't function. So while he recuperated, a doctor from a neighboring hospital was dispatched to handle consultations. That doctor came to visit Ethan for a checkup. As his wife, I stood by trying not to intrude, observing from a corner of the room. The doctor wore a consistently serious expression, perhaps indicating a less than ideal prognosis. Unconsciously, I clasped my hands together, silently praying, my palms damp with sweat. When the examination finally ended, the doctor looked me straight in the eye and called me into another room. I wondered if there was something he couldn't say in front of Ethan's mother. I stiffened, thinking his condition had worsened, but the whispered words in my ear were not what I had expected. "Please contact this number right now," the doctor said, pressing a note into my hand. Frowning, I asked what he meant. The doctor then, in a tense voice, conveyed something even more astonishing. Upon hearing it, my body involuntarily trembled. Goosebumps rose all over, and despite the room not being particularly cold, a shiver ran up my spine. With that, I dashed out of my in-laws' house. A few hours later, my mother-in-law called again. She must have realized I was not there. There had been several missed calls before that I had ignored. Truth be told, I didn't want to talk, but every time I decided to ignore the calls, they'd come again seconds later. The relentless sound filled the room, feeling like I was losing my mind. Reluctantly, I answered, feeling somewhat prepared. I took a deep breath. "Emily, where on earth have you gone? The housework isn't even done." My mother-in-law's shrill voice came through the speaker of my phone. The piercing tone was so loud that I immediately pulled the phone away from my ear, unpleasantly reverberating in my head. "Come back immediately. This is unacceptable." "No, I won't come back. Not today. Not ever. And I won't be contributing any money either." "Huh? What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath and said firmly, almost as a final blow, "I'm divorcing Ethan." How long had it been? I wondered. She fell silent. It was only a matter of seconds, but it felt unnaturally long. Perhaps my uncharacteristic assertiveness was hard for her to believe. It seemed she finally grasped the meaning of my words after slowly digesting them. Leaving my child in a state like that. Do you have no heart? What kind of cruel wife are you? Nothing she said could hurt me anymore because questioning my heart was now my prerogative. I've already uncovered all the lies. You're not fooling anybody here, Mother. Ethan isn't really in a vegetative state, is he? The person beside me on the call said calmly. My mother-in-law sounded taken aback, a sharp intake of breath audible. It was Ethan's elder brother who made that observation. Why are you with Emily? Her voice remained shrill, but the emotions behind it seemed to shift from anger to a mix of surprise and panic. Ignoring her question, Ethan's brother sighed exasperately before starting to explain. As it turned out, the doctor sent to Ethan's family was a colleague of Ethan's brother. Ethan was initially taken to the hospital where his brother worked. His brother, upon hearing the news, found it suspicious from the start. The idea that Ethan had fallen into a vegetative state, given the circumstances of the accident, felt off. However, since Ethan's brother wasn't his attending physician and had been estranged from the family, he didn't feel comfortable questioning them directly. Consequently, he couldn't get a clear picture of the situation. It became apparent that my mother-in-law had taken Ethan home from the hospital to prevent the truth from coming out. However, after my father-in-law's recent collapse, other doctors became involved at the family's home, leading to the exposure of the lies. Ethan was not in a vegetative state. A doctor, a colleague of Ethan's brother, handed me a note while revealing this. The note contained my brother-in-law's contact information and another phone number for a certain location. After fleeing my in-law's house, I immediately called my brother-in-law and met up with him. When I learned the shocking truth, various emotions swirled inside me. Surprise was followed by fear, anger, and disgust. During the explanation, my mother-in-law tried to interject several times, but fell silent, as everything he said was accurate. Adding insult to injury, my brother-in-law said, "The reason you were having Emily put money in is because your hospital is struggling financially, isn't it?" By your hospital, he meant the clinic my in-laws were running. A gulp was heard at those words, likely from my mother-in-law, though it seemed to come from somewhere behind her. "Ethan, I know you're listening over there," he said. We didn't miss the faint voice that slipped out. Just like I was on the phone with my brother-in-law, Ethan seemed to be watching my mother-in-law's reaction on his end. It was indeed a lie that he was in a vegetative state. Along with disappointment, there was a sensation as if the remaining affection for him inside me was swiftly disappearing. With my mother-in-law now silent and Ethan muttering, "Herm, I can explain," repeatedly to evade telling the truth, I hung up the phone. Several days later, I visited my in-laws' house with some people, despite declaring over the phone that I wouldn't come back. I sighed at finding myself there again, but it couldn't be helped. There were things that needed to be done. Besides, I wasn't alone, so I could confidently step into the house. I reflected on what my brother-in-law's colleague had whispered to me a few days ago. The contact information I was given included not only my brother-in-law's, but also the police's. Before taking my mother-in-law's call, I had immediately filed a police report. At the front door, I saw familiar sandals and sneakers likely belonging to my in-laws, but among them was a distinctly different pair of women's heels. Of course, they weren't mine. After a glance, I took off my shoes and headed straight to Ethan's room, or rather, where he was supposed to be sleeping. Well, pretending to be asleep would be more accurate. There, my mother-in-law, freshly discharged father-in-law, and a young woman who appeared to be a nurse were surrounding Ethan's bed. My mother-in-law and that woman were each holding one of Ethan's hands. I knew the truth. That woman was actually Ethan's affair partner, Sarah, a 29-year-old a decade younger than us. The investigation was complete. She must have been meeting Ethan when I wasn't around in my in-laws' home. I guessed my in-laws were in on it too. I felt like laughing at the sight of Ethan breathing regularly in his sleep, but held back. It didn't matter anymore since the lie had been exposed when I made that call. He should be fully conscious and able to hear and understand what's being said. I took out the divorce papers and held them out for everyone to see. Ethan, let's get divorced, I said. At that moment, his eyes snapped open. He must have been listening all along. He quickly sat up, abruptly crawling out of bed and clinging to my feet. No, I don't want to break up, he pleaded. I couldn't help but let out a mocking laugh as I watched him beg. It was almost amusing to see his affair partner watching with despair on her face. From Sarah's devastated expression, it was clear Ethan had been whispering sweet nothings to her, telling her she was the most important person in his life. It was incredibly selfish for him to now claim he didn't want a divorce after all that had happened. How irresponsible of you, I said. Exactly, fulfill your duties as a wife. Don't be cheeky, my in-laws yelled, trying to intimidate me into obedience. But their efforts were futile. I had no intention of dealing with them ever again. Enough fooling around, my brother-in-law rebuked them in a low voice. He had been silent until then, but it seemed he couldn't bear it any longer. Do you think there's a woman out there who would be a wife to someone who pretends to be in a vegetative state to cheat and scam money? If you want a wife so badly, why not have that woman instead, since she's come here so boldly? Both mother and father must be so happy, right? I fired off questions one after another, but no one could answer. They just bit their lips and looked around, visibly troubled. They wouldn't be able to do as they pleased anymore. Talking about a new wife, life, or the future was pointless. Give up already, I said. This house is surrounded by the police. When my brother-in-law quietly informed them of this, everyone looked up at once, turning pale with despair. The sound of teeth chattering echoed in the room as they realized the full extent of their actions and the consequences they would face. I had solid evidence of the financial exploitation by my in-laws and the verbal abuse I had endured, which I submitted to the police along with my report. Ethan's mother and the others hurled verbal abuse at me, claiming it was all my fault and a scam to get money. From the time Ethan's income as an interior coordinator dried up and he started working on a freelance basis, he had been planning this with his parents. He had some intense insecurities towards me, thinking that if I could live as a freelancer, so could he. But it didn't work out for him at all. Frustrated with me, he probably maintained his pride by cheating with someone younger to feel superior. Don't think I don't know father also committed tax evasion, Ethan's brother said, giving their father a cold look despite his desperate denial. It's something that'll come out once investigated. When we gave the signal, the police officers waiting outside entered the room. After that, Ethan and I divorced smoothly. I didn't want to talk to him directly anymore, so I had lawyers handle all communication. Please, can we have just one more chance to talk face to face? Ethan pleaded and begged, but I firmly refused. Don't contact me anymore. I've left everything to the lawyers. With that, I deleted all of his contact information and made sure to block him from contacting me. The investigation into Ethan's father's hospital revealed massive tax evasion. Unable to pay the fine, the hospital closed down. Rumors spread among the neighbors. Hey, you know that hospital over there? Turns out they were evading taxes. Can you believe it? The director seemed like such an upright person, but who could have thought their true nature was like that? With no money to move out, Ethan and my father-in-law ended up living with my mother-in-law, hiding from the public eye. But I made sure to get back every penny they scammed from me. I ruthlessly took compensation and all the money I had given to my in-laws. I also made sure to get compensation from Sarah, the woman Ethan had cheated with. I don't know what happened to her afterward, but I heard she's working hard to repay the money she borrowed from her parents. Ethan and his parents ended up drowning in a mountain of debt. Since Ethan's parents were too old to find new jobs, Ethan seemed to be working hard to support both of them while struggling to make ends meet. He worked multiple part-time jobs, giving up on being an interior coordinator. On the other hand, I decided to return to my parents' home. Despite knowing the situation, my parents warmly welcomed me without prying, and their kindness deeply touched me. I decided to help out with my parents' business at home while continuing my career as an interior designer.